everyone, you're welcome back to Yoke Ladies Place once again. My name is Cynthia. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be taking us on how to make a corset. This is an highly requested video. The last time I came live on Facebook, a lot of viewers requested I make a corset. Alright, so here is it. It's excited as much as I do because I'm really excited about this project. Alright, so without wasting much time, let's get into the project. Alright, so I'm going to be drafting the front pattern first. As you can see, the fabric is already folded into two. So after that, I'm going to roll my guideline so that I can have a starting point for my pattern. Then after that, I'm going to quickly draft my basic bodice, just the normal, usual basic body that we all know, the regular one. So the first thing, I'll mark down the length of my armhole, my nipple point, my underbust, then my waist length with my half-inch seam allowance. Then after that, I'm going to extend all the lines. Alright, this is my guideline, which is the starting point. This is my armhole length, my nipple point, my underbust length, my waist length, and then with half-inch seam allowance. So the next thing is to measure my shoulder. My shoulder is 16 divided by 2, that is 8 inches. I'm going to measure 8 inches on the guideline. Then I'm going to still measure that same 8 inches on my armhole length. My armhole length gives me my chest line, so I'm going to connect these points together now. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is to measure 3 inches neck width, and then I'll come down by 1 on my shoulder line. Then I'll connect the points together. Then after that, I'll add my seam allowance of ½ inch to my shoulder line. So after that, I'm going to measure my bust measurement divided by 4, and then I'm going to put that measurement on my armhole length, that is my chest line. Then on my waist length, I'm going to be measuring my waist measurement divided by 4. Then after that, I'm going to connect these 2 points together. Alright, so because this is a front pattern, I'm going to measure from my shoulder drop to my chest line and locate the midpoint. And then on that midpoint, I'm going to come in by ½ inch. Then I'm going to use 3 part of my rulers to connect it from the midway to my shoulder. Then I'll use the cuff part of my ruler to connect it from the midway to my chest line. That is going to give me my front armhole cuff. Alright, so now here is my basic bodice, the usual one that all of us knows how to draft. Alright, so we are going to be going into today's class proper now. Alright, we are going to be drafting the corset. So this is my nipple point, and on my nipple point, I'm going to measure my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 plus ½ inch. My nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches, divided by 2 will give me 4, then plus ½ inch. Then that will be 4.5. I'll measure that 4.5 on my nipple point. I'll also measure that 4.5 on my underbust and also my waist length. Then after that, I'm just going to roll it. So the next I'm going to do is to measure from my nipple point to my underbust so that I can determine my bust radius. Mine is 3.5, so I'm going to measure that 3.5 upward. Starting from the nipple point, I'm going to measure that 3.5 upward. Then after that, I'm going to extend this point. Then I'll also measure that my nipple to nipple measurements, which is 4.5. I'm going to now connect it with the nipple point. So we can as well just extend this line to the armhole line like so. Alright, so when this is done, the next thing is to bring out our dart so that we can shape the cup. So I'm going to measure 1 inch on both sides of this line, 1 inch to the right and 1 inch to the left. Then I'm going to roll it straight to the waistline. Then after that, I'm going to use the curved part of my ruler to connect it from the underbust to the nipple point. I'll do the same thing for the 2 sides of the line. So the next thing I'm going to do now at this upper part, I'm going to measure 0.75 on both sides of the line. 0.75 to the left and then 0.75 to the right. If you are very busty, instead of using 1 inch on the underbust, you can use 1.5 inch or 1.2 inch on both sides. Then at this upper part, you can use just 1 inch. Depends on how busty you have. Here I'm working with bust 40. And after that, I'm just going to use the curved part of the ruler to connect it back to the nipple point. Alright, so the next thing now is to determine the neck depth of the corset. So you can decide to leave it at this upper bust, or you can bring it to the armhole length, or you can bring it all the way down to your nipple point. But I won't advise that anyways. So, and you can just decide to make it to be in between the upper bust and then the chest line. Can be in between these 2 points, and that is what I'm going to be going for, because I don't want it to be too revealing. Then from this my neck depth now, I'm going to measure 1 inch. This 1 inch is fine for all. Yes, it's fine for all sizes. So the next thing you want to do now is to come to your underbust. At your underbust, you measure 1/2 inch upward. This 1/2 inch is basically the seam allowance for joining the cup back later on. So after that, just make it into a line the way I've done. Can you see? Then the next thing you want to do now is to connect it back from your neck depth to the underbust with the curved part of your ruler. Just use your ruler to connect it together like that. Alright, can you see? We bring out the shape of the cup on one side, remaining the other side. So at this other side, to bring out the cup, you go to the armhole line, you measure 1/2 inch downward. This coming down of 1/2 inch is optional. You can just leave the shape the way it is. Depends on the style you are making. So the next thing you want to do now is to measure your bust radius to this other side plus 1 inch. I told you the distance from my underbust to my nipple point is 3.5. Then if I add 1 inch to that measurement, it will give me 4.5. So from my nipple point, I'll measure 4.5 towards this side. Can you see? The reason for this is because this side, the cup of this side is more bigger than the first cup. Alright, so from the underbust now, you connect these points together with the curved part of your ruler. So the next thing now is to connect these points to the dart leg. So you just place your ruler and with the slight curve, you connect it together like so. Then after that, you finish the first cup as well. But at this stage, you can decide any shape you want for this side. You can decide to have a sweetheart or a round, depends on what you want. The cup at the other side can stop here as well. Can you see? So with this, we have successfully drafted our cup. Can you see? So this shape, like I said, is optional. You can decide to have a round shape. So assuming you're adding a yoke to your pattern, you can just use your French curve to round this part very well so that you can have a smooth curve at this upper part. So that you can use the upper part of this corset to cut out your yoke. So with this now, we have successfully drafted our corset pattern, and also we have the yoke with it. So this is 2-in-1 tutorial. So we have a corset pattern with yoke. Alright, so the next step now is to replace our dart intake. At this upper part, the total width of my dart is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to measure that 1.5 inch at the side. Then for the down part, the total width of the dart intake is 2 inches. I'm going to also replace it back by the side. Then after that, I'll just connect this together. So this is my dart intake. Then after that, I will now add my seam allowance. Note the dart intake is not your seam allowance. So first replace your dart intake, then after that you put your seam allowance. I added 1.5 inches as my seam allowance, both on the upper part and also on the waistline. Then after that I connect the points together. So just extend that point back to the allowance like that. So this upper part here is the yoke. So, and then the down part is the corset. So with this now, I believe we all know how to draft corsets with yoke. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to be doing now, let's assume I'm using this as a pattern for the yoke. I'm going to add my neckline. So I'll just draft any neckline of my choice. You mustn't do this neckline that I've done here, so you can just decide to do any one you like. Then after that, now we are going to be cutting it out. First, I cut out the yoke. Then I'll keep it aside. Then after that, I'm going to cut out the cup. Then after that, I'm going to cut off the darts. So that is the darts. You cut it away. You no longer need it. You can see that is the dart. So on the cup as well, you take out the darts. So just cut off the darts. Alright, so this is it. We're done cutting it out. So the next thing now you want to do is to add your notch. You need to notch this or you label it. Is very, very important. If not, you're going to mix it together. So this is the nipple point here. I'm going to notch it. Then at the second side of the cup as well, you notch the nipple point as well. You can see I've notched it, or you can also label it. See, if you match these two sides together now, they are equal. You can see they are equal. So you can just label it, but if you can make do with the notch, you can notch it. All right, so you're also going to be notching the down part so that you will know that that is the down part. And the down part is the part that you're going to be connecting back to the lower part of the corset. You can see, you need to notch it so that you will know the direction in which it's going. So you can just label it like I said. So while sewing it now, the first step is just to join these two pieces together. Then after joining them together, you will now connect them to the lower part of the corset. That's after you might have joined the two pieces of the lower part together as well. So you really need to notch the down part so that you know the part that is going to be down. The part that is going to be the down at the end of the day. Because if you don't notch this, you miss it together. There's no magic. You will just miss it together. So you really need to put your notches, or you label it. And as you can see, I've notched the nipple point and also the down part so that I will know the part that is going to be connected accordingly. Can you see? It's going to be like this at the end of the day. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to be doing now is to use this cup to cut out another one, because this cup now is not having seam allowance. So you need to add seam allowance to the side, not the nipple point, but just the side. You can see just this side. You need to add your allowance to this side and also this side. Note, you are not going to be adding allowance to the nipple point, because while drafting our bodies, we already add seam allowance of 1/2 inch to the nipple to nipple measurements, if you remember. So I'm going to be placing my cup into another fabric so that I can add my same allowance. This is the nipple side. I'm not going to put allowance on it. Rather, I'll put allowance on this other side. Then I'm going to add just 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just 1/2 inch seam allowance on this side. If you cannot do 1/2 inch by side, you can just use your tape rule to measure it. So I've added just 1/2 inch to this side. And note, this fabric that I'm cutting out is folded into two. And like I said, every other thing remained the same. You can see I've added 1/2 inch, just half. This other side, which is the nipple point, I did not add any allowance to it. So don't forget to put your notch back on it. Notch the nipple point. And then you notch the down part. Then at this point, you can discard the one you use in cutting it out. And you can also label it. So discard this part now, you no longer need it. So you take the other side and then you are going to add your allowance into it. So place another fabric on fold as well. And like I said, you're not going to be adding allowance to the nipple side. So I can just trace out the shape of the cup. So this other side, I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance on it. Just 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you can remove it. As you can see, I only added 1/2 inch. Then after that, you cut it out. And when you're done cutting, don't forget to add your label, or you put your notch So notch the nipple point, and also you're going to be notching the down part so that you can know which is which. It's very, very important. Notching is important. All right, so that's that. The first one that we cut out with the lower part, we are going to discard it. We no longer need it. Like I said, you trash it. Then this one that you added your seam allowance, this is the one you are going to be using. So this is the down part. I'm not adding allowance to the down part because I came up by ½ inch on the underbust while drafting the pattern, if you remember. So that ½ inch is the seam allowance for the down part. So we are going to be moving on to the back. So I've placed another fabric into 2 folds, then I'll roll my guideline. After that, I'll roll down my zip allowance. Then after that, I'm going to measure my waist length. Then on my waistline, I'm going to enter in from my zip allowance by ½ inch. Then I'm going to redraw my zip allowance. Don't forget to come in by ½ inch on the starting point of the zip allowance, like so. So you redraw the shape of the zip allowance. This is just to prevent the back bulge. So after that, I'm going to measure my shoulder divided by 2. Then after that, I measure down the length of my armhole. Then I'll just extend the line. Then I'll just place the French cuff to finish off the armhole, like so. Then on my armhole line, that is my chest line, I'm going to measure my bust divided by 4 plus my seam allowance. I added 1½ as my seam allowance in front. I'm going to add the same thing on the back. So on my waist, I'll measure my waist divided by 4 plus my 1 inch dart and 1½ seam allowance. Then I'll connect it together like so. Then after that, I'll measure the 3 inches standard neck width, and then I'm going to come down by 1 inch on my shoulder, and I'll connect these 2 points together. Then after that, I'll add my seam allowance of ½ inch to the shoulder line. So basically, our back pattern is ready. So the next thing now is to bring out the shape for the corset back. So first, I'll measure my nipple to nipple distance starting from the zip allowance. I'll roll it upward to the chest line. Then after that, I'm going to take ½ inch dart on both sides of the line. And note the dart leg is going to stop 1 inch before the chest line. So after that, just connect it together like so. Alright, so the next thing we're going to be doing now is to bring out the shape for the back corset. And if you remember, in front we came down by ½ inch on the armhole line. The same thing is applicable to the back, so just go down by ½ inch on the armhole line. Then for the neck depth of the corset at the back, you can decide to do any neckline of your choice, but I'm just going to be coming down by 1 inch below the chest line. You can go down
as far as 3 inches below the chest line, but I'm just going down by 1 inch from the chest line. So just measure 1 inch below the chest line and then you blend it back like so. All right, so the next thing now is to tighten the back dart so that the corset tube can be firm on your body. So at this upper part, I'm going to take 1/2 inch on both sides of the dart line. Then I'm just going to roll it straight and connect it back to the waistline. So this is our new darts. This step is very important if you are doing a corset. The tube, it's more like a tube, so that it can be firm on your body. You need to take this dart. You need to tighten the back dart like I've done. So this upper part here now is the yoke, in case you want to replace it with yoke. This is your yoke. So this is your yoke here. So the next thing now is just for me to be cutting it out. But then if you're having a yoke, you're going to draft your neckline. So just put any neckline of your choice. So I'm just making a V neckline here. It's just for illustration purpose. So the next thing now is to cut it out. First I'll cut out on the yoke part. Alright, so this is the yoke part. You keep it aside. We don't need it for this project. So then the down part, you are going to be cutting off the darts. Just trim off the darts. Then after that, you are going to notch your zip allowance, both up and down. These two parts that are going to be connected together, you need to notch it as well. The notches are very, very important. You need to notch it or you label it. So these two parts will be joined together while sewing. And then again, I will advise you notch the down part too, so that you can know the down part. All these notching are very important. So I'll just notch the down part and also the down part of this too. So that once you see it, you know that, oh, this is the down. Because they look alike. They really, really look alike. So we're going to be stopping here today. In our next tutorial, I'm going to be showing us how to sew it all up. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please kindly subscribe so that you don't miss the next tutorial. Until next time when I will be coming your way. Bye.